Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bill Hyland, and I'm the historian of St. Bernard Parish, and it's a great pleasure and privilege to welcome all of you here. And we've begun tonight's program with a performance of Down by the Riverside, which is a great black spiritual that is so typical and so important in the cultural identity of our black people. So it's, again, great to have you here. I apologize for the confusion about when we were going to have this. It seems as though we've all been under something of a black star here, because an evil star, because the first night we were to do this, it was predicted that we were going to have torrential rain and severe, dangerous weather, which thank God we did not have here, but had in other places, experienced in other places in our region. Then we couldn't do it the 20th because there was a revival. And there, Pastor Raymond Smith, the great-grandson of the founder of the First Baptist Church in Verrettville, was honored. And one of our panelists tonight, Miss Leola Anderson, was involved in that wonderful program. And so we're doing it tonight, but then tonight I had 5 telephone calls and heard from many people who were prevented from coming here because of the fire that happened quite unexpectedly in Southern Scrap. So, whatever can go wrong will go wrong, but guess what? 3 centuries, 2 centuries later, 125 years later, we're still here, and that's what's important. Well, now, at this time, I'm going to ask Seth Braniff to show particularly a film clip which we did back in June for Juneteenth Day in 2024, and just look at a few images of Verrettville.
Community in St. Bernard Parish traces its roots back to a freed slave fighting in the Civil War and the message he says he received from God. Reverend Samuel Smith dedicated his life to helping freed slaves navigate the Reconstruction era.
Maddie Kurth shares the story of Verrett's First Baptist Church on this Juneteenth holiday.
There's more than a century of history tucked between the pews of the First Baptist Church in Verrett. The church stands as a beacon for the community, over 150 years old. Chronicles passed down through generations.
What they see going on now, it haven't always been this way. I need them to know that.
The story starts in the late 1800s with Reverend Samuel Smith, a former slave freed by the Emancipation Proclamation.
Juneteenth is a one-day celebration, but it wasn't a one-day event.
Samuel Smith was born into slavery. He worked on the Proctor plantation in what is now Shell Beach.
He never had to cut cane or anything. He was the yard boy. Took care of the livestock.
When New Orleans was captured in 1862, he enlisted in the Union Army and passed down through generations a story of coming face to face on that battlefield with his former slave master who was shot and injured.
Had to make a decision. Help him out and let him go or kill him.
And in that moment, he spoke to God and chose mercy.
And he said, I'm gonna let you go back home. And he said, I want you to organize and build me a church. Those were the words that were spoken to my great-grandfather by God Almighty. He did that.
First Baptist Church was born, and it didn't always look like this. Come hell and Katrina high water, this is the 3rd building to house worship. And for the newly freed slave and his parishioners, the 1.5 mile property came at a cost.
$300. And it took them 10 years to pay it off.
The community is still functioning today. Garland Sanchez, Reverend Raymond Smith's brother-in-law, remembers how different things were growing up. He says in Verrett, everyone is family.
Anyone could chastise or correct you. If you did something down the street and you got a whipping from someone, don't tell your mama, because you're going to get another whipping for not listening. That's instilled, and I'd like to pass that to my children and the future generations.
Reverend Smith remembers being a teenager when his father led the fast-growing congregation. He baptized 52 people in one day using the bayou water from the canal across the street, and later 42 more at one time.
Watch my dad dip every one of them. Every one of them. Baptize all of them. That was the 2 largest baptismal services that was ever held in St. Bernard Parish, right here in First Baptist Church.
While the founding parishioners are dead and buried in the cemetery behind the church, their descendants still find their way home on Sundays.
Even if they don't come to this church, they still come to the community to meet with family and have dinner.
Well, God bless y'all. Amen.
Through the decades, the church evolves. Sunday services now live streamed on Facebook, but through the culture bearers of Lower St. Bernard Parish.
So I'd like to take that history and move towards the future, to build on it, and hopefully others can learn and move forward.
At the young age of 85, Reverend Raymond Smith looks ahead to the day he passes the legacy of his ancestors to the next church leader.
Well, my time is getting short and short. I'll soon be stepping down. I don't know who the next pastor will be, but he'll become the pastor, or she, whoever it be, will become the greatest church, or one of the greatest churches in the state of Louisiana. Hallelujah. Yes, ma'am.
So Reverend Samuel Smith went on to help his community even further, being elected to the police jury, the school board, and as Justice of the Peace. His great-grandson says all are welcome to their home off Bayou Road on Sundays. Liz.
So let's see if we can go back. There we go. This is from Clarence Loughlin's Ghosts Along the Mississippi, and I showed it to the Reverend Raymond Smith, and he identified this image as an image of the very first church at Verrettville shortly before it was torn down and rebuilt. And it's very typical of the churches of that time. I remember my cousin Rosal Ducro Tennant knew Clarence John Loughlin and found him rather disagreeable. But she did encourage him to come down and make a photographic record of St. Bernard at that point. So some of his wonderful photographs were published in his book, The Ghosts Along the Mississippi. So this is an image of that original church, and of course the present day church. This marker we put up, and it's something that we're very proud of. We put it up in 2016. The St. Bernard Historical Society, in conjunction with the St. Bernard Parish Tourist Commission, paid for this marker, and it gives formal recognition to the significance of Verrettville and this church congregation.
Community in St. Bernard Parish trace.
I think that's enough of this, because you know I am a dinosaur after all. So just a few things I want to say before I bring the panel up, and we need to turn this projector off regretfully. Thank you. First of all, I thank the people of Verrettville and the congregation of the First Baptist Church of Verrettville for working with us to bring this fascinating history that has become obscure and should not be obscure. The people who live in Verrettville, the First Baptist Church of Verrettville, the faith-based and family-based community that Verrettville is, all of these things constitute a cultural heritage legacy of immeasurable value. So thank you all for your support. And then one thing I am going to mention, because of course you know I have to mention early history. So you know Verrettville, of course, is very important. We understand that the purpose of these settlements after the Civil War was to break the cycle of plantation life and to enable the enslaved people who have been freed to live successfully as freed people. And I think tonight when we hear the panel talk, we'll see how after generations, just how successful the concept of that settlement was. It's very curious. Marshal Verrette's family came here from Montreal in Canada with Bienville and Iberville. So they were Canadian French, not Acadians, but Canadian French. And then he married Elodie Chalère, and her grandfather, Francois Chalère, had made his livelihood and had become very wealthy in the slave trade. So here we have two people, for a person who had been a planter, his wife, whose family had been involved in the slave trade, acknowledging that it was so important to lift up the people who had been enslaved and the injustice of it. So that is some of the origin of Verrettville. But remember this, it's not the people who sold Verrettville to the enslaved, formerly enslaved. It's what the formerly enslaved people did with the opportunities that were given to them. So that we will celebrate tonight. One final thing to mention, the original owner of Proctor Plantation was Pedro Tomás or Pierre Thomas. He had been enslaved. He had come to Louisiana from the Congo, and he purchased his freedom from his enslaver. He became a contractor. He worked with François Chauvin de Léré on building the first St. Bernard Church and the first St. Bernard Commandant's Office, which became our first courthouse at St. Bernard Cemetery and Church. He also built, among other things, Ducrot Museum, which is one of the oldest standing structures in St. Bernard. But Pierre Thomas, who lived in St. Bernard, also became a leader in the people and the free people of color community in New Orleans. So he had a great deal to do with the building of Tremé and the Faubourg Marigny. So, and then the reason that Pierre Thomas was given the land grant by the Spanish government, by Governor Esteban Miró, in 1788 that became Proctor Plantation was, guess what? He was in a regiment of free people of color who fought in the American Revolution under the command of Governor Bernardo de Galvez. He fought at Baton Rouge, Montchac, Mobile, and Pensacola. So here we have a St. Bernard free person of color who is a founder of the United States by virtue of his military service in the American Revolution. So isn't it curious how all of these histories, whether they're of free people of color, the enslaved who came here from West Africa predominantly, and the white people, how they all overlap and how ultimately that's what makes us all Creole. Now at this time, I'm going to ask Ms. Leola Anderson to come up, Mr. Perry James, and Ms. Gladys Sanchez. And you can see Gladys is already set up here. And I want you to come on up there. And we are going to begin our discussion of Verrettville. And to me, it's so important that the descendants of the people who founded Verrettville are here to tell the story. You know, it's one thing for a historian to be able to say these things, but these are the living descendants of the cultural heritage. So, Perry, I know you're very fond and you're so proud of your ancestor, who's an ancestor of many people in this room, Samuel Smith. What would you like to say about him and Mr. Kibbe?
Okay, I am a descendant of the first Sam Smith, the one that fought in the Civil War and came on back as the story goes. Okay, just like it was passed down, and my uncle, Pastor Smith, has become notorious for it, but it was passed down to him, his siblings, and then passed down to their children, his grandchildren. The only way that we were able to keep that was because it was passed down from generation to generation. If that's
Very good.
so.
What do you remember about the schoolhouse that was there in Verrettville?
I'm not that old. I have no memory of that. I have no memory.
Standing in your lifetime?
Not that I recall. No.
There was a one-room schoolhouse.
Right. I heard about it, and there may be some that's still here that attended, but that was just past me. Now, to give you an idea, to give you the era that I grew up in, okay, I born in 1958. So I have really no recollection as far as from a baby till like 1964 when I started elementary school at Valley Consolidated School. So whatever happened prior to that, I only heard about it, but I didn't witness it.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
We were hoping to have Curtis Moore here tonight, and he actually attended the school there in Verrettville. But unfortunately, he's a bit shy, and I think all of you, 'cause I know probably Leola is about the only one other than me up here who's used to being in front of people. But so again, I just thank everyone who's been brave enough to come up here. So Leola, what would you like to say about Verrettville and what it means to you?
Of course, Verrett is, I have no memory as a kid that Verrett does not play a vital role of. From every Sunday mornings, my mom would sometimes bring my brothers and I to Sunday school. Most of the time she'd drop us off, or Sister Joanne Ben, bless her heart, she would bring us to Sunday school, and we would stay in Verrett the entire day. And then, of course, my summers were filled with Verrett from just going by various family members' houses. I have so many memories of sleeping by my Aunt Althea, who has recently gone on to be with the Lord, or even Betty Milton was like a mother to me. She's recently gone on to be with the Lord. Staying by their houses when I was growing up. At that time, my grandmother had, her health had begun to fail, so she wasn't presently residing in her home, so I would spend those days by other relatives. But then also, you know, again, going back to the church life, we would have vacation Bible school. Everything in my childhood was centered around the church and the overall faith, family, fun community that Verrett gave. And I'm talking about from the time I was a little kid. Just this morning, in fact, my father showed me a picture that I don't think I've seen since Hurricane Katrina, since before Hurricane Katrina. And there I am with a purple velvet dress on, smiling in my grandmother's living room after coming home from church service. And I think it was a picture from 1984. So without telling my age, it was a very long time ago. So, you know, but then I also could remember, I was sharing with some friends and family that even I grew up on Santani, which was, I'd say, one of the safest neighborhoods to date in St. Bernard Parish, but I never trick-or-treated, not one time on Santani. Every single time we went back to Verrett and we would trick-or-treat in the Verrett community. There was absolutely nothing wrong with Santani. However, Verrett was where our family was. Verrett was where our culture was founded. And so we literally did pretty much every single thing in Verrett. My memories could not be more fonder of the place where so much heritage lies. And I didn't say, but I'm a descendant of Theodore Jones, who also ran away to join the war and then come back to help and found Verrett community.
Very good, thank you. And now Gladys Sanchez, who is a Stewart and also a Smith descendant. You know, you're going to find, just as all the Islanios are related, so are all the people from Verrettville, and the Verrettville people are related to some of us too.
That's right. Well, I am very much scripted, guys. So I am going to be reading my narrative that I prepared for you. So good evening. I am Gladys Sanchez, and it is a pleasure to be here to share a few highlights of my early experiences living in Verrett. I am blessed to have been reared all of my childhood and early adolescent years in a historical place called Verrettville. Until moving to St. Paul, Minnesota, as you can imagine, leaving a small tropical, rural, farming, fishing atmosphere to a city where it can get 20 below with long, constant snowfalls. After 27 years, I returned back to Verrett, remembering one of my many conversations with my grandfather, Reverend Sam Smith, sharing with him that, Papa, I might be moving to Minnesota. He told me to be sure to find this place where the Mississippi River began once I was there. I did so, and my family took many pictures into the Mississippi River. We went to Itasca State Park, about 5 hours or so from where I live. There before me was the origin of the Mississippi River. It starts off as a stream in northern Minnesota. We have many pictures of us standing in the Mississippi River. I thought, how ironic to move from a state where the Mississippi River ends to a state where it begins. It begins in Bemidji, Minnesota, and New Orleans, Louisiana, and Bemidji are originally designated as sister cities because they are at the beginning and the end of the Mississippi River. They share in economic ties. I was thankful to my grandfather, Reverend Sam Smith, for directing me there. Some of my favorite childhood memories, playtime or adventures or activities in Verrett. First, I could remember a constant flow of people coming to our home in the backyard to look for this hidden, buried treasure that my great-great-grandfather, Pa Sam, shared with my grandfather, Sam Smith, that it was there. And I believe the college has some recordings of my grandfather sharing his experience about that buried treasure with then historian Frank Fernandez. We have had generation after generation looking for this hidden treasure. In fact, as we walk around today in the yard, we ourselves would be looking and saying, where could it be? We are now 7 generations in and nothing. My second experience was picking pecans. There was an abundance of pecan trees throughout the village. The routine was after school, we picked as many pecans as we could Monday through Friday, and every Saturday the pecan man came to Verrett, a large truck with a scale attached to it to weigh the pecans. My last recollection of the price per pound paid to us was about 65 cents, I believe. So not only was it a source of food to eat, but also an economic resource to earn money. We were definitely happy as children about earning the money. Third, I can recall and visualize right now picking okra. That wasn't a daunting task. Many pros and cons about it. My grandfather, Reverend Sam Smith, would knock on the door in the early, warm summer mornings, about 5 to 6 a.m., to get us up to go harvest and pick okra. This was not a chore that you can just get up and put on anything. You really had to prepare and think about what you were going to wear. Clothes and shoes, because there may be snakes on the ground. a hat for the hot summer, long sleeves and pants because the vegetation of okra was sticky and itchy, a towel for your face or your neck. And as children, this large vegetation peered over us, and it felt like we were in a hay maze. You could actually get lost. After retrieving all the okras, we then sorted them out on my mom's front porch into small, medium, and large hampers. We brought the small and medium-sized okra to the city of New Orleans, where my grandfather sold them to the French market. We never knew or learned how much he earned, only that we were going to get 25 cents for our help, and to be able to boil some to eat with vinegar, salt, and pepper, which was a fantastic treat for us. Instead, he said, "Mabel," which was my mom, "give those children a frozen cup." My thoughts were, you have got to be kidding me. My brother and I have eaten as many of those all night, so without my mom's permission, and we wanted my grandpa to give us that 25 cents so we can purchase some candy. And he didn't even pay my mom for all those frozen cups. She sold back in the day. Again, okra was another one of those resources that we not only consumed them, but we earned money for them. Special places in Verrett that I love going to first and foremost was church. Church was a vital part, as Leola said, in our life growing up. The building was almost centrally located in the middle of the village. It was not only a safe and a sacred place to worship, but it was also a dynamic place as a child. The people were full of fun, energy, many activities for children, a very strong Sunday school, which was mandatory to attend. First Baptist Church of Verrett Sunday School was known as one of the best for the number of attendants and its financially sound raising of funds. Throughout the African American community churches in our parish. Vacation Bible School also had a ride. We went to day camp, and I saw my cousin Thomas here. That was my first experience going with him to day camp. We visit the state capitol in Baton Rouge, was able to walk up all those steps. That was fun. The ushers had an annual bus ride to Fontainebleau. The Sunday school had an annual trip the second Saturday in July to Ottoman Park or City Park. Our church had a lot going on, both within the church to meet the needs of the members, as well as outside to meet the needs of the community. Second place I loved going was by my grandparents' home, Sam and Gladys Smith, whom I am named after. I was always in awe and fascinated on how structured and clean their home was, both indoor and outdoors. I enjoy eating some of my favorite dishes. My grandmother would make sweet potatoes and blackberry dumpling. These specialty dishes were made with the blackberries we would pick right in Verrett. Other fruits we enjoyed after retrieving in Verrett were the blackberries, pears, persimmons, misbeliefs, pecans, figs, okra, oranges. Third, the store, which was called the White House. It was the largest building in Verrett. It was our only store. Because of the scale and size of it, is where it probably got its name, the White House. The place seemed massive to us as little children. We were able to purchase such staples as bread, eggs, milk, cold cuts, etc. On one side of the store was a bar, and the other side of the store was a grocery store. The upstairs had many rooms. I think it was maybe a little motel. I'm not sure. I believe it was. The last place I loved going in Verrett was Miss Mary and Mr. Charlie's house. She sold an assortment of penny candies. It was a delight to go there. With 10 cents, you would get 10 pieces of candy, all packaged in a brown paper bag. It was the best feeling and treat as children. One of my childhood dreams, one of my aspirations when I was little, was to somehow work with children and their families. In particular, children with special needs, disabilities, or challenges. In Verrett, my cousins and I, and one of them are here today, Patsy, we used to play school on the front porch of our homes. I would retrieve extra ditto papers at the end of school from all of my teachers, and we used to play school during the summer times. Those were valuable and fun times. Holidays in Verrett, my goodness, invoke such wonderful feelings of family, community, and love. Family that lived in the city, as Leola said, came down for Halloween to trick or treat and to attend church for a watch night service to bring in the new year. A full church on our knees at midnight. Then you would hear the sounding of loud bells. Eating pound cake and having eggnogs. Christmas Day throughout the week, you would go from house to house in Verrett, eating and spending time together. I would always get a bike at Christmas time. We would have Christmas plays at church. The children would get lots of Christmas gifts. Each child was given an Easter basket. We had Easter plays, so much food, fun, and culture. Some lessons that I've learned, there are several important life lessons I've learned from many of our community parents, elders, teachers. To summarize or paraphrase or give you the essence of some of those lessons, life is about being good and doing good for others. It will give you a feeling of satisfaction and happiness. Appreciating the role people play in your life and not underestimating the impact people have on our lives. Everyone, they said, has something to teach you. You don't know it all. There is nothing wrong with being wrong, they told me, and there's nothing wrong with admitting when you're wrong. And most importantly, having a strong belief in a higher power, our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. In closing, I just want to say in this little village, descendants of slaves have produced many. And I have just a board here that I wanted to share. This little village produced people with bachelor's degree. I can't see here. Bachelor's degrees, master degrees, PhDs, commercial artists we had, trucking companies, managers, architects, business owners, teachers, school principals, commercial artists, engineers, electricians, truck drivers, registered nurses, educators, physician assistants, nurse practitioners, petroleum operators, doctors, pharmacists, attorneys, bankers, welders, clergy, social workers, chef, police, military officers, contractors. That little community of free descendants of slaves has produced all of these people from generations on up into us. It reminds me of the song, Lift Every Voice and Sing. the song by James Weldon Johnson, written in the 1900s. He was a principal of a segregated school in Jacksonville, Florida. The song is real, and we use it now as the national Negro anthem, but the song is about faith, hope, unity, resistance, and memory. It served as a reminder for Black Americans that each generation has had to lift voices along with those in their community to demand and protect human rights. We have so much to be thankful for in Verrett. I also have a poster, Did You Know? Each year in Verrett, we have this festival called Back to Verrett, where a lot of those descendants are people that earned all of those degrees, have moved on to do various things in their lives, come back and we celebrate at this big festival, which is going to be this year, hopefully, the second Saturday in May. Did you know First Baptist Church was formed in 1879 by the farmer Passam? He was a slave who was a police juror, and he was known as Passam. First Baptist Church is on the National Registry as a historic site. Junior Rodriguez, the White House that I talked about, the store that we love going to, he lived there during my whole childhood and up until his death. He was a police juror in our parish, 1976 to 1992. He was parish council, and he became our parish president. Verrett produced more crops than any other Black town in St. Bernard, and that's where I talked about my experiences as picking okra there. And Reverend Dr. Raymond Smith, he was the founder of St. Bernard chapter NAACP. He was the first person. And here I have at this big festival that we have second Saturday in May, some of our community elders. So about 4 years ago, I think we may have started it, did 2 years consecutive, and then missed a year. And then we thought, let's honor our people who are 80 and over. And that's what we did. Reverend Dr. Raymond Allen Smith, Cynthia Winesberry, Mabel Stewart, my Aunt Althea Winesberry, who we just recently lost, Ella Rita Sanchez, she's here today. We lost Sister Florence. Brother Jerry Moore is here, Anna Rose, Marguerite Johnson, we lost. Ethel Maurice, we lost. Frank Winesberry is with us. Leroy Williams. And hopefully at this festival, we'll have the other people who have turned 80 that we can celebrate them as well. This last piece is very dear. I work at Araby Elementary School. And one of our families, she was just talking about Verrett. And I thought, okay, what does she know about Verrett? Before I said, hey, I'm from Verrett. So she told me she used to pass on Highway 46, and I believe that is St. Bernard Highway. And she said she always, prior to Hurricane Katrina, noticed this tree in our cemetery, and she loved it. She sketched this tree that's in the cemetery in in Verrett. And after Hurricane Katrina, she noticed the tree never grew leaves. She sketched it, and she gave it to me. Once I shared with her that I'm from there, I grew up there, and this tree was located right where Passam tombstone was. I remember just in front of that, my grandmother on All Saints Day would have us painting her parents' tomb, and now that tree is no longer there because when they went to do our cemetery, put the tombs back in order, they knocked the tree down, and we now have a road there. So this tree is in the place directly where Passam's grave was. And she gave it to me. I made a copy. I gave to our church. And so it's very dear to me because it is not there anymore. And the last picture that I have is of my grandfather, in which the era that I grew up in, Verrett, Reverend Sam Smith. His son is now the pastor of the church. But those were just my account. Like I said, I'm very scripted. I like to stay on task. But those were my accounts of living in Verrett, such a historical place. And I hope you guys enjoyed our segment tonight.
And now, we have Charles Jackson, and he is going to play the song. Tell them about that. Tell them. Lift every voice.
So Lift Every Voice and Sing is, again, like I said, written by James Weldon Johnson. He was a principal in Jacksonville, Florida. And it was during the segregation time. And like I said, the song is about faith and hope and unity, resistance, and memory. It serves as a reminder that Black African American people from generation has had to lift their voices to kind of get the things they needed, or to go in the direction that they may have wanted to go. So we sing that song. We just sang it on yesterday at our Black History program at our church. A beautiful song, a hard song to sing, but the words, if you listen to the words, have such profound meanings. And he's going to ring it. Lift every voice and sing, to earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmony of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the hope that the process has taught us. Sing a song full of the faith that the presence has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun, let us march on till victory is won.
All right. Now, Leola, I'm going to ask you, since you had to honor the Reverend Raymond Smith last week, would you tell us a little more about him?
Sure. Of course, my memories of First Baptist Church is pretty vast over the past few decades, I'll say. And I believe he's been a part of those decades for about 40 years, 30, 40 years. And so one thing I can say about Pastor Smith, I'm a practicing attorney, and one of the things that he says to me is that, girl, you don't know, you might not remember, but I told your mama that you were going to be an attorney. And so he's not only a pastor, but he's also a prophet. In addition to those two roles, he's also a staple of the community. He says, and I agree with him, that he has now transitioned to the role of father amongst the brethren. And when I say the brethren, I mean amongst the clergy. And they treat him as such. And so one of the roles for this, it was really a parish-wide revival, but within the parish-wide revival, they were honoring him for all of his hard labor and care for the community over the years. Over the years. One of the other things that I could say about Pastor Smith is that he is a historian. He can tell me some things about Verrett that I probably will never be able to completely get right when I tell the story myself, because he literally sat at the feet of who he calls Pa Sam to learn all of this. And then one thing I can also say about him is he is extremely knowledgeable of faith. I tell him all the time that I'm also a licensed minister, and I tell him all the time that he has forgotten more than I've ever learned, because he is just so astute in his faith and in his discipline and in his study. And he has an amazing way of conveying the word. Of course, as an African-American Baptist church young lady, that's where I get my start. We as Baptists, we have a certain way that our word is conveyed. And certainly I'd say that he is a doctor of being able to convey that exactly the way it was intended. And so we love him dearly. He's sick today, and so he wasn't able to make it, but we certainly honor him even in this moment.
All right, and then Gladys, I want you, then we're going to go to Perry too, but I want you to talk about the culinary tradition in Verrettville. And we have your wonderful mother here who has been the great ambassadress of the culinary tradition of Verrettville. So would you feel comfortable about speaking about some of the things that you all do?
Well, I'm not a cook, but I will clean and pick up and do all of that good stuff. But some of the dishes we've had in Verret, and I have a cousin here, Diane, and as I said, we just lost our aunt out there. It was at her home where we had a lot of these great dish. My Aunt Rita was known for oyster dressing. We had
Hamilton.
Yes, she made the oyster dressing on Christmas. We love my cousin Diane's sweet potatoes. We have okra gumbo, filet gumbo, just an abundance of things. We have sweet potato pies, pecan pies, and it was just a tradition on a Sunday after church to either go by my Aunt Bebe's house or, which is Leola's grandmother, between my husband's grandmother, Miss Odile, my grandmother, Gladys and Sam Smith, and Miss Althea's house, back and forth as children eating some of those rich traditional staples that we've had there. But unfortunately, I don't cook any of it. But I do know, you know, right. Perry said how to eat it. I do know how to do that. But yes, we have very rich heritage of when it comes to some of the food cooking. Leola, you know anything?
Oh, sure. Well, one of the things that I extremely love is Betty Milton's. You forgot about it.
My aunt, Betty Milton, yes, she made the absolute best stuffed crabs and sweet potatoes.
Now, with her stuffed crabs, one thing I wasn't going to do is pick the crabs, right? We weren't going to do that. But I can also remember she mentioned about my Aunt Althea. She used to cook some very good fresh greens. I was telling the story not long ago that I was over at their house, you know, as usual, and we're eating. And so she asked me if I wanted something to eat. And I said, yeah, of course. And so she put some greens on my plate. Well, you know, I looked at it. I'm probably, you know, 13 or so. And I'm like, man, this ain't no greens, you know? And so I didn't want to eat it. And so she kind of looked at my face to know that I wasn't really, you know, receptive to her greens. And so she kind of grabbed the plate back and was like, that's because your mother only cooked frozen greens. This is fresh greens. So, you know, of course, fresh greens, okra gumbo. I was just talking to Ella Rita just the other day. She has this famous, that I think is famous, vegetable rice. She see me. What is it? Broccoli rice.
Sure. I have one more. I dare not forget to say. I also had an aunt, Perry's mom, and my cousin Buffy, who's here, mom. She was the person in Verret that made all the wild food. Rabbit, turtles, coon, Kawain, anything like that. She knew how to clean them. She knew how to cook it. And people would seek her for her ability to make a good dish out of those. We always had to, when we was little, what is that, Auntie? You know, because we didn't want to get tricked into eating anything. Even my mother-in-law, Garland's mom, she was very good at, you may know, turtle and also yaka meat. I loved how she prepared that dish. So Verrett, like we said, was very rich in some of those food. People from the city came down and enjoyed lots of those.
I was just gonna ask, did you say coon?
Coon, yes. Raccoon, muskrat, nutra. All of those things were not nutra, Perry said. We've seen them there, but they ate the muskrats in Verrett. I watched them as they came in, skinned them, mussed them, cut them up, washed them, and in the frying pan. They tell me it tastes like chicken. I would never know.
I think I have a funny story. This just happened a few days ago. My dad is here. My parents, they're aging, so they now reside with me. And I get home one day, I pull in the driveway, and I'm not really paying attention. I get out, it's dark, and I open up the door, and I almost tripped because there was a cage with a live raccoon. Was it a raccoon there? Yeah, a live raccoon sitting in the cage, and I'm like, goodness gracious, I almost tripped over the thing, you know, because it was sitting right there by my door. So these are traditions that are consistently handed down even to this very day. As I can remember, what is it, the big football games, the Super Bowl. I can remember for Super Bowl Sundays, you are guaranteed to have some level of wild game to eat in Verrett, and you know, just lovely, lovely eating, and it was free. And one of my other cousins mentioned today that they would go fishing right in the bayou. They would get crawfish right out of the bayou. You know, again, we were able to live right off of the land, and so it was so important that our, I think you said Thomas, Pierre Thomas, I think is the way you said it, that it was so important that, you know, he was able to donate this land to us so that we could begin to live and to generate the type of culture and pass down from Africa even to here. You know, many people talk about, you know, the 40 acres and a mule. Well, we certainly got a piece of the 40 acres and a mule, and I believe that it's a part of that as to why Verrett is what it is.
And you know, before we finish, I want someone particularly, there we go. I want Perry James, and Buffy's in the audience too, his brother. Let's talk about the cemetery, because you are both the most wonderful stewards of that cemetery, and that is a sacred place. That's where the original freed, enslaved people who founded Verrettville are buried. So, Perry, why don't you start?
Okay. All right, I'll be happy to start, but I promise you I won't be as long as them two on to my right. Our cemetery is very precious to us. That's where we lay our loved ones to rest. We do our very best to maintain them. There are some people that are there almost on a weekly basis for their loved ones. But then again, there are others that just once they put them back there, that's all over. So as of, to make sure that it all looks good, presentable to those that are coming to visit or whatever, that makes us have to do some things that the family should do. And we don't have a problem with it until they complain that we painted over their headstones or something like that. But, you know, it's not that we don't want to do it. We prefer that the families would do it for one reason. While you're painting those tombs and caretaking on those tombs, that gives you a time to reflect. Sometimes we've got to look and see just who we are working on or working around or what have you, because we want to make sure that everybody is included and nobody is omitted. But once again, it takes a while, and it's a little daunting task, but it works out. It really does.
Is Buffy coming up here, or is he shy?
But there's a lot of history, a whole lot of history in that cemetery. If you just take your time and walk through there, sometimes I go through there and there's one that I might have overlooked for a while or whatever. And when I kind of brush the, just kind of wipe it off a little bit, the headstone, it brings back a lot of the memories. It brings back this is what we cannot do, which is we will not just put them back there and leave them there. We will make them all a part of our history. And the only way that we are doing that is perpetual care. We do our very best to keep it up. I'm sure we could do a little better, but we do our very best to keep it going. And once again, that history, that if you walk past those grave sites and you see the history, it almost makes the hair stand up on your neck in a sense. We are so rich in culture, in history. As much as Gladys said, she barely touched or scratched the surface of what's going on or what has transpired in Verrett. But we're going to keep at it. We're going to make sure that every little, even the minute details are brought to the forefront.
Well, thank you. And then, in closing, there's been a great deal of well-justified attention on Fazanville, which was, we believe, the first of the settlements for the freed enslaved people, established about 1867-69 on land that Jean-Pierre Fazan, who was a free man of color before the war and a very successful businessman, made available for the freed enslaved people to purchase. But that settlement was destroyed. And it was a terrible thing that it was destroyed. That should never have happened. And history forgotten is, regretfully, all too often, history repeated. However, while we mourn the loss of Fazanville, we also have to celebrate a cultural heritage legacy that is unsurpassed, that is still today with us in the parish of St. Bernard. So that's what we've begun to do tonight. We're going to continue to look at Verrettville and learn more about it because it's really fascinating. I had the great good pleasure of knowing Gladys's grandfather, Samuel Smith. As I was a young man, he was Mr. Kibbe to me. And Mr. Kibbe built Frank Fernandez's house. He built houses all in Florizon. He built tombs in St. Bernard Cemetery for the Fernandez family, for the Torres family, for Emily Nunez Vega. I could just go on and on and on, the things that Mr. Kibbe did. And then he was always so kind about opening his home. And in 1983, or it was 84, I have the article, we actually went down to interview him, and he actually gave a wonderful 2-hour interview to Times-Picayune reporters in my presence. And so that was really the beginning of the acknowledgement of this incredible phenomenon that we know today as Verrettville. So I've said enough. You know, I remember sitting through a mission which was given by, of all things, a Jesuit priest from London, England. Not a Spaniard, not a Frenchman, not an Italian, not an American, a British Jesuit, very unusual. And he concluded his remarks by saying that the best orator knows how to be good, be quick, and be gone. So it's time for me to be gone, but thank you all so much.